So there's a spy balloon that unfortunately is not here to say congratulations, Buck and Carrie. That would be kind of fun, you know, if it was like one of those things you see at the beach. You ever see that, Clay? When they have the plane or the balloon that, you know, like a Goodyear blimp or something. But it is not actually here to congratulate me on my upcoming nuptials. It is a spy balloon from China. And it has been flying over the United States for a couple of days. So you also have the backdrop to this pretty interesting. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken supposed to go to Beijing I think, was it today? I mean, it was imminent, his departure. And it looks like they're pushing back the trip. He's postponing his trip to China. The Biden administration looks totally flummoxed by this. There's this spy balloon that was so the Chinese government is claiming this thing is a weather balloon, sure, that has blown off course because of force majeure.
Where would it? I mean, these are good questions that I would love to know the answer, but it seems to me that if you had a weather balloon in China, and it now is over the central United States, evidently, as it continues to just kind of float around. Like, that's a really wildly off-course balloon, the weather balloon, isn't it? I mean, like, I where was it intended to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we don't know, man. Look, I'll tell you, spy balloons was not in my AO at the CIA. Like, this is not something I spent a lot of time with. The closest thing I can think of would be the, defensive sort of balloon surveillance stuff that you had up on U.S. military bases. But these things operate at higher than commercial air traffic, so that's part of this too. It is way, way up there. So unless you've got like a U-2 spy plane, which can go up to 80,000 feet, this is above commercial airline traffic level in the sky. So it's not like people are walking around Montana like, hey, look at the balloon. Apparently now it has even moved a bit more, right?
I think it's in the central part of the country now is the report.
I mean, they're saying they're afraid to shoot it down because of debris, but if you're shooting it down over Montana, how much debris are we really talking about here, right? I mean, just tell everybody in the area, look, duck and cover. I don't know. Like, I think you got to shoot this thing down. Why wouldn't you shoot this thing down? It's clearly intelligence gathering.
I think you got to shoot it down. And also, what would stop a Republican governor from shooting it down? I want to talk about that when we come back. If it's over the state airspace, would a governor of a red state not have the authority to shoot this thing down himself? I'm just wondering. This Chinese spy thing, I've got so many questions about it. And we're going to play a couple of audio clips because the Pentagon has done a spokesperson has come out and tried to answer some of these questions. But my first question that I just can't get over is, how is it not United States policy that the minute any foreign spy craft enters into our airspace, we immediately shoot it down? So initially, the reports are that this was in Montana. So I don't know if it came across Canada,
yeah,
or if it came all the way across from, like it came across the Pacific and went across Washington, and we didn't really notice, or it didn't go public until it got to Montana. I haven't seen any sort of explanation of how it came to be in Montana. Now it's in the middle part of the country. But my first primary question here is, did we not know that this had entered United States airspace? And how is it not just straightforward, no questions asked, American policy to immediately shoot down foreign spy craft that enters into our airspace? That seems like it should be like a basic rule of our policy.
Well, this is unmanned, so that makes it a lot easier, right? So it's, you could think back to the Soviet Union and the shoot down of the U-2 spy plane, which created a huge international incident. That only happened because the plane had a malfunction, if I recall, and had to drop down to altitude where Soviet missiles could actually lock onto it. But this is unmanned, and I don't know. I think we're scared about what would happen if we shot it down, falling debris. I find that unpersuasive, especially when it's over Montana. I mean, no offense to Montana, but like there's a lot of places you could shoot down a balloon in Montana and it's not going to hit anybody, right? I mean, you're not shooting it down over downtown Los Angeles. So I would think you'd be able to pick an area where it's, very, very, very unlikely to pose a risk to anyone. I don't know how much. Look, I'm not a spy balloon expert. I was going to say this. This is not. Some things I know a lot about. This isn't one of them. I don't know how much actual machinery and how how much dangerous debris would come from a shoot down. But I got to think you're shooting it down, because the alternative is to just let it keep floating around America, taking photos and sensors and whatever it wants of whatever it wants.
Yeah, and again, my point on this is just I don't understand how American policy isn't to immediately shoot down any spy craft that enters into our country. I mean, so I want to know how long this has been here and why we suddenly find out about it in Montana. We got a couple of cuts here I'm going to play for you. This is the Department of Defense Press Secretary Pat Ryder giving a balloon update this morning at the Pentagon. Listen.
In regards to our announcement last night regarding the high-altitude surveillance balloon, I'm not going to have much new information to provide other than to say that the North American Aerospace Defense Command continues to monitor it closely. While we won't get into specifics in regards to the exact location, I can tell you that the balloon continues to move eastward and is currently over the center of the continental United States. Again, we currently assess that the balloon does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground at this time.
Okay, we got one more here because he's
Apparently
asked.
You can see, by the way, according to the Pentagon spokesman, the balloon from the ground. So I guess it can operate, at 80,000, 60 to 80,000 feet. But maybe it's lower, because then they're saying you can see this.
I guess it would partly depend on cloud cover, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where you are. But my question, I want to play one more cut for everybody out there who's getting informed about this. But my question is, do individual state governors, if the Biden administration is saying we're concerned about the debris falling or whatever else, why would an individual state governor not have the authority to protect the airspace of his state using his own Air National Guard and shoot this thing down? I'm just asking that question. I don't know what state it's over right now, but let's pretend it's over Nebraska right now. I would think it would be popular politically in Nebraska for the governor of Nebraska to shoot down a Chinese spy balloon, right? If it continues and it's in my state of Tennessee or Alabama or any other clearly red state, and to your point, Buck, there are lots of parts of any state that are farmland, right, where there's not a great deal of industry. I agree. You don't necessarily want to shoot anything down over a major metropolitan area, but most of Montana, where we initially became aware of this, is farmland, and there's always the danger of falling debris, right, from a variety of different spacecraft and other objects. It's not uncommon for things to fall, and most of the time it doesn't hit someone.
Do you know that there was, according to the Smithsonian, which I'm looking at the backstory here, in 1945, a Japanese balloon bomb killed 6 Americans, including 5 children in Oregon. Yeah.
It came all the way across the Pacific, or they brought like a submarine or something and released it?
It was that's a good question. I got to see what the pathway is, but it was a Japanese balloon bomb. I mean, it's actually another part of World War II history very few people know is that the Japanese, just for pure, really psychological gain on their part and to create anxiety in the U.S., they did seize U.S. territory at one point during the Second World War. Attu Island, which is off the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska, the Japanese had a specific mission to seize U.S. territory, and they did for a short period. Then the Marines went in there and showed them, who was really going to hold that territory. But apparently there was this incident. This is making the rounds now, by the way, online, which is why it comes to mind, of a balloon bomb that killed 6 Americans back in 1945 in Oregon. So, look, balloons have been, obviously, the Germans were using them at one point, this notion of balloons in warfare and for reconnaissance. In fact, I think you can argue that some of the earliest usage the earliest Air Force reconnaissance vehicles were hot air balloons.
Yeah, and used in the Civil War to become my nerddom here to help survey the opposing, lines and also the topography of the defensive terrain. Let me also, yeah.
No, I was going to say I'm still sitting here thinking, the DoD has said the balloon's going to be over the U.S. for a few days. Shoot it down.
Yeah.
Well, what is? Shoot it down. There's no.
I mean, again, I'm just saying. Imagine, Buck, that you or I was the governor of Nebraska. Right, and I'm just using Nebraska because it's center part of the country. We don't know what state it's exactly over. It could be Oklahoma. It could be Missouri. All of these states have Republican governors right now, right? Almost everywhere in the middle part of the country has a Republican governor. Why would you not shoot it down? And then if the Biden administration is angry, does that not play really well for you politically in your state to shoot down a Chinese spy plane? Now, remember, the Chinese, because they lie about everything, said, oh, this is a weather balloon. There's no real danger here. But the Department of Defense said this is not true. Here is cut 24.
First of all, we are aware of the PRC's statement. However, the fact is we know that it's a surveillance balloon, and I'm not going to be able to be more specific than that. We do know that the balloon has violated U.S. airspace and international law, which is unacceptable. And so we've conveyed this directly to the PRC at multiple levels.
Why are we such pussy willows, Buck? We've conveyed that it's unexceptable to the PRC to violate international law. I mean, I can't think of a wimpier
Biden
response.
White House. I mean, this isn't, we're sitting here. I think everyone, I haven't seen anyone
violated international norms, and we're really upset at you. How dare you? This is something they entered our airspace to spy on us. And we're like, well, we'll just wait. It's eventually going to leave the country. I mean, this is pathetic. Shoot the damn thing down. I mean, I don't understand how this is remotely difficult. Unless they think, hey, it's actually something more serious. Like, hey, that they're concerned that that this balloon, I mean, to your point, Buck, it exploded and killed 6 people. Is it potentially something where if you shoot it down, there's a massive explosion? Do they actually think that it could be something that has more serious consequences than just falling out of the sky? But I mean, the chutzpah here of China to just be like, hey, we're just going to go ahead and send in a spy balloon and fly it across the whole United States and claim that it's a weather balloon. And they're not going to, all they're going to do is wag their finger at us and not send Anthony Blinken to China. I mean, this is, to me, an embarrassing sign of weakness by the United States government. Buck, I don't know. Maybe there's somebody out there in our audience who would be knowledgeable enough about this. But I really am kind of focused on the governor aspect of this, because as the balloon is in the middle part of the country, tell me why, and I'm just working through it in my head, a governor would not have the right to protect his state's airspace from Chinese spycraft and have the authority as the governor of the state to shoot down this Chinese spycraft if he or she, whoever the governor is, made that choice. Does that make sense logically to you, that you would have that ability? I mean, certainly the United States should do it.
Yeah, well,
but
what's the
if they wouldn't?
What are they going to do if someone did that, right? Let's say you call that National Guard. Let's say right now, I mean, it was over Montana. Maybe it'll be under. Maybe it's over South Dakota right now, right? So Governor Noem, for example, could order South Dakota National Guard to scramble some, F-16s or whatever, and they go up there, they shoot this thing down. I don't know if that's even what would happen, but let's just say that happens. What is the federal government going to do, right? I mean, are they going to say that you're not allowed to deploy the National Guard to address this issue? I don't know. I got to say, I think it is likely, in my mind, that the Biden administration is going to be forced to take this thing down. Otherwise, it just floats in our airspace for days.
Well, yeah, and again, it's a strange concept of federalism, because national defense is typically, obviously, the responsibility of a national government. But, I'm using, for instance, the border as an example. Governor Perry in Texas can call out the Texas resources to try to deal with the mess at the border, even though the border is also a national issue. So there's both state and federal response on border-related issues. Again, I don't think are they going to arrest Kristi Noem for shooting down. I'm just using Kristi Noem as an example because, again, we know that she's up there in the vicinity of where this Chinese balloon might be. And are you telling me that any Republican governor who shot this down, this wouldn't be like the greatest political accomplishment of their tenure to then get in an argument with the Biden administration over whether they were too tough on China? Like, this seems to me like one of the most no-brainer political wins of all time. I'm just trying to think through the legality of it because it should be something that our federal government should have done. We should, I believe, shot this thing down the moment it entered our airspace. But if you're a governor, like if I'm the governor of Tennessee right now, I would shoot this thing down in a heartbeat. I just would. This would not be a tough call to me. China's not going to spy on Tennessee. We're going to shoot it down.
The problem, Clay, that the Biden administration runs into with all this is the longer they wait to shoot it down, if they do end up shooting it down, it looks like they dithered, right? So they kind of, the momentum is for letting it continue to float the longer it floats, because then you're going to have to turn around and tell people, oh, yeah, we just didn't know what we were doing. So, they've postponed Blinken, the Secretary of State's trip to China over this. This is becoming a real diplomatic incident. And the Biden team they got no idea what to do. I mean, they're totally floundering.
The only thing I can think is if China has somehow actually made this spy plane loaded with a bomb, and they're concerned if they shoot it down that it could lead to some, much more substantial event. In other words, they're not telling us the full story. This doesn't add up.
I don't buy it. We've got the continued national fascination with the Chinese spy balloon as it moves east. We have updated this assessment to include that the balloon is over Missouri right now, Clay. That's the latest.
Bill Maloogian, who not only is the only person evidently who covers the border, but I just saw on Twitter that he has tweeted out that it may now be over Missouri. There are other balloons that might be up there. And so my wife says, all right, Buck, that we should be making a smarter argument about this. I have been deluged with text messages from her about the Chinese spy balloon, given the fact that you are going to be married tomorrow, and we just got the advice to listen to your wife. She is saying that it may have something to do with international law, and that there are use of force provisions based on whether it's a violent, imminent threat or not, and what force can be used. I say, okay, respectfully, if I am in the United States and there is a foreign spy craft in our airspace, I don't care at all what international law says I am allowed to do to it.
What are you gonna
arrest me when I go to
the Hague for shooting down a spy balloon with nobody on it? No.
That is my argument. Also, politically, I'm never losing another election if I'm a Republican governor and I shoot down a Chinese weather balloon.
Can I just? This is where the action speaks louder than words. Aphorism is very important. International law is just something that people talk about. The real international law when it comes to spycraft in your airspace is you shoot it down. Because otherwise you're going to what? You're going to bring some, now you could take some sort of diplomatic sanction, but to resort to diplomacy in this situation would seem to be feeble at best, because you just want them to stop spying. By the way, the Pentagon's been very clear. It's not a weather balloon. It's a spy balloon, everybody, okay? They're not, so there's no question as to whether the Chinese are using this thing to spy on us. The only question is whether we're going to do anything about it.
I don't understand how it isn't American policy that the moment that any spy craft enters into our airspace, we shoot it down. Like, how is that not standard American policy? Does anybody, I mean, just for anybody out there listening across the whole nation, millions of you right now, how is it not our policy that again, the minute it enters United States airspace and it is spycraft, that we shoot it down. Now, my concern, Buck, is that this is just part of a larger test by China, and they wanted to know, hey, will the Americans even notice if we send a Chinese spy balloon across their border? And I wonder, it went public in Montana, but did this traverse all of Canada as well to get to Montana? Did it come across from the Pacific and float across Washington and then on into Montana, and we didn't notice it, or we didn't have it go public at that time? What is the method by which this entered our country, and why did we not become aware of it until it was in Montana? And again, the government has now said it is in the center part of the country, and it is evidently visible, the Chinese spy balloon, if you are in a middle part of the country right now where there's not cloud cover. This is frankly unacceptable, and it looks very weak that we're going to allow it to go across the entire country and do nothing.
Well, I also want to know, are we going to allow the Chinese to retrieve it? I mean, at this point, you got to what? So are we just going to be like, hey, guys, the spy balloon that you flew over the continental United States from coast to coast or close to it? We're going to hand it back to you now. We want to make sure you went through the effort to photo and do sensors. Who knows what they're doing? We want to make sure you get the data that you guys tried so hard to get here. I don't think that's going to work. So at some point, what is the plan here?
Does it go all the way over the Atlantic? It's a good question. Is it
do
not
we allow
controlled?
them to retrieve it? If we don't allow them to retrieve it, why don't we blow it out of the sky?
Yeah, it's a good question. Is it not controlled? It seems to be traveling essentially on the waves of the air, or whatever you want to, however you want to call it.
It can change. It has propulsion.
But is it broken is what I'm saying, and it's just basically following whatever because right now it seems to be just floating across the country, and I'm wondering if it's just following the air currents or if it's adjusting, and are they in other words, are they remotely controlling basically this Chinese spycraft at this point, or is it broken in some way and it's just kind of floating across the American airspace? I don't know the answer to that.
I just wonder also, maybe it starts to lose altitude at some point. Maybe somebody out there, one of those red states with a Lapua 300 or something, is just going to be I'm going to take a shot at this thing. I don't know. I don't think that would bring it down, but I'm just saying, this is going to end in a very weird fashion because what is the protocol here? The protocol, I mean, if you look at
lot
history,
of people, you think people might start, this is actually really funny. I've been asking if a governor just did it. You think people in Alabama are just going to take their guns out and start shooting at the Chinese?
If it dropped down low enough to an altitude where people thought maybe they had a. By the way, do not recommend that because what goes up must come down. The bullets will come down. Right. You can hit somebody. Don't do that.
How high could a bullet? I have no idea. I've never thought about this. How high into the sky could a bullet go from a typical weapon?
Well, people never fire them really straight up in the sky for obvious safety reasons. That's a good question. I mean, a 50 cal would definitely go miles. If you had a 50 caliber rifle, that would travel miles.
60,000 feet. Let's just say 60,000 feet. That's roughly 10 miles in the air, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, you can't reach that for sure. But
right. I'm just wondering how far into the air someone could shoot.
Okay.
How far would it have to come down?
One interesting thing here is that there's now sources reporting to Fox News that the Biden administration has been aware of the balloon for months. So
I just laughed.
I mean,
months.
I got to tell you, we went through so many in training in the CIA. Went through all kinds of assessment scenarios for all kinds of stuff, invasions, terrorist attacks, whatever. They put you through this as part of the training as an analyst, and war gaming, all that stuff. Similar stuff to what they do for people who are sitting at desks in the Pentagon. I never saw anything about a spy balloon, so this is outside my bailiwick.
If they have been aware of it for months, first of all, that's far more troubling. Also, it means the only reason they canceled the trip to China was because it became public, not because they actually did it. So that is, I don't know. Has China been sending these spy balloons into the United States for months, and we've just been allowing it to occur? Because, I mean, do we send spy balloons into China? And again, I do not have large-scale knowledge on this, but do you gain that much from a spy balloon compared to the photos you can take basically from satellites in space. In other words, if you go on Google Maps or Google Earth or whatever right now, you can pretty much zoom in street level to almost any street anywhere in the United States. I don't know how Google puts all their footage online and everything else, but my point is just with satellites that are already up there, do you gain very much from having a balloon in the current, territory that you can't gain from a satellite in space? Again, I'm not an expert in certainly.
I can say this too. I mean, I used to know
spycraft.
a lot more about the most cutting edge and even secret technology when it came to surveillance from satellites and things like that. I was never that. There's a whole specialty in the intelligence world of people who just do that. I had a very rudimentary 101 understanding of some of the government capabilities. They change it's been 10 years, right? So I don't even, they could probably do stuff that I've never even heard of right now. I'm sure they can. And I don't know. Obviously, with the Chinese, I have no idea what their full capabilities are with regard to a balloon like this. So it's a weird situation, man. I mean, look, we'll continue to follow it. We don't want to just keep saying what the heck's going on with this balloon, but if we get any updates on it, because it has caused, just to review, the imminent travel by the Secretary of State, which would have been the first meeting of its kind in 4 years, but from the U.S. Secretary of State to China. That has been postponed. The Biden administration has not told us what the plan is here. It seems like the plan is to just let this thing keep floating, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. They do say it is definitely a spying balloon, and they're not willing to shoot it down yet. So this is kind of where we are. It's a weird situation. What do you got?
I'll just point out something that could be funny. I've been asking if a Republican governor would just shoot it down, which I would be in favor of. It's also possible that you could shoot the wrong balloon down, because there are weather balloons that are up there that would be owned by, people in the state. So while you could score political points if you shoot down the right balloon, you could also look really silly if you shoot down the wrong balloon, right? So you want to make sure that you shoot down the right balloon, not something that's trying to measure atmospheric pressure, and that is actually a weather balloon in your state.
You do not want to be the governor, Republican or otherwise, who scrambles the F-16s to shoot down the Weather Channel's balloon that's looking for tornadoes or something. You don't want to do that. That would be a bad move.
Yeah.
But
I
think we could probably figure out which one this is. I'm just curious if anybody with military background has any sense of how they think this is going to end. Because that's the part of this. Okay, so if we're not shooting it down and we're just going to let it float and it's not coming down on its own, we're just going to let it keep going and eventually make its way over the Atlantic?
Their plan would have to be, Buck, that it's just going to eventually leave American airspace and go over the Atlantic. That's why I was asking, is this still operable, or is it basically floating on prevailing wind currents at this point and broken in some way?
Keep in mind, one of the big problems when you go back to Gary Power in 1960 when the U-2 flight was shot down by a Soviet surface-to-air missile. During those were American surveillance flights of the Soviet Union, looking at trying to figure out their missile capabilities. It wasn't just that they captured Francis Gary Power. Obviously, it was also Powers. It was that they captured parts of the plane too, which then had intelligence value for the Soviets. So it was a problem on multiple levels. And I just think not only is this a violation of our airspace, but if the Chinese are somehow able to actually get their hands on this thing at the end of it all, then they get their way. I mean, right? That's we can't let that happen. That's crazy. I don't know, but the Biden administration, you have to remember, this is the Biden administration that presided over people, thousands of them, chasing the landing gear of planes taking off from Kabul airport, right? I mean, this is not the A-team when it comes to national security and sound decision making. That's putting it mildly.
Do you feel good if you're Taiwan? You're like, we're going to defend you, Taiwan, and we just got spy, all sorts of things flying over American airspace doing nothing?
No.
No, I would you be like, hey, these Americans, they're really going to stand up to China. You know what they did? They just let a Chinese spy balloon float over the entire country because they didn't want to upset China by shooting it down. I'm not thinking like, oh, those guys are definitely going to scramble and defend Taiwan. We just look like the biggest pussy willows on the planet.